Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. Thanks for being here. I appreciate you being here every week, as always. Got another fun cash week on the show because we're leaning more towards the awesome side in this current moment here in 2020. My guest on the show this week is comedian Matt Storrs. Matt, I met at I can't remember the name of the bar, but it's closed now. But I initially met him and my previous guest Hattie at during the Cinderblock Comedy Festival that was thrown by Corey Spencer a few years ago because they were doing their show, the Storrs Objection. That's Matt's show, and I had also had a nice chat with him at QED where they do the show here in New York City, and I found out that they weren't actually living in New York when they were doing Cinderblock because they were still in the Phoenix area at the time. And I know nothing about Arizona, but Matt is from there, and so we had a nice little chat about the Phoenix, Arizona comedy scene and his life out there, and as well as like a lot of pop culture talk on this show as well. So we're gonna get into that a little bit today with Matt Storrs. So I hope you guys are enjoying the show. I also want to let everybody know, if you don't already, probably not because I say it every week on the show, I do have a Patreon. It is patreon.com/awesomedisaster. And I recently added a new rewards tier as a way of having if you are interested, you can be a monthly sponsor of the show. So if you go to patreon.com/awesomedisaster, you can check out some of the reward tiers I have available exclusively on that platform. But as always, I'm going to keep, my goal is to keep this show free because I appreciate that people are just here listening. So thank you guys very much. You can follow me on Twitter at @ComicWillCarey, and this is a fun one. So let's get into my chat with comedian Matt Storrs. I've been in New York for 10 years. It'll be 10 years in this June. And I've had two favorite places that I like to go to a lot. Yeah. Explode.
Like actual, like with explosions?
Like explosions. Like Pommes Frites, the Belgian fry place that used to be over on 2nd Avenue. Mm-hmm. Gas line exploded. Okay. The building blew up. And then New York Style Eats, which was a diner in Sunnyside that I used to go to a lot when I lived with Kevin Frolics. Similar thing, gas line blew up, leveled like the entire block. Like the Alpha Donuts survived, but that's about it.
Well, wow. That's a lot of explosions.
And according to my fiance, I still can't call myself a New Yorker.
Okay, yeah. I mean, if you caused the explosions,
I did not cause the explosion.
Well, then you'd definitely be a New Yorker because presumably it was some sort of mob associated. Like they didn't pay their protection money.
Sure.
Interesting story about protection money. I feel like I'm a New Yorker because I went to Hattie didn't tell you this story? I'm probably going to ask you that too many times.
It's okay. I don't think she did, but go right ahead.
So we were at we have a Chinese restaurant. We just recently moved, but we just off the stop we used to get off on. There's a Chinese restaurant. We go in one night after a sketch show, and we're sitting down. And we're like, all right, we're going to get some food, and this is going to be fun. Mm-hmm. And a guy comes in. It's approximately 11 o'clock at night, mm-hmm. and he's like, hey, where's the money? I'm like, all right, whatever. And the employee's like, come back at 11:30. He's like, no. Just give it to me now. You should have the money now. I don't want to come back. She's like, no, I give you money twice a week. At the same time, you have to come back. And then they just start shouting. And he is stereotypically Italian. And just
like straight out of Central Casting for the Irishman.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, okay. And then they're screaming, they're cursing back and forth. And he's like, oh, this is what you do in front of your customers? And we're like, we just want our Chinese food, man. Like, he's like, I really hope something bad doesn't happen, with your storefront or anything. You have so much glass up front here. It'd be horrible if something were to come in and break it. And it's like, what are you? Okay, like
he says this to you, or he says this to the owner?
To the owner, or employee. I don't know if they. Yeah.
And is this in Brooklyn or Manhattan?
This is in Astoria.
This is in Astoria.
Yeah, this is in Astoria. So they have their hands everywhere.
Oh, of course.
So I felt very, maybe not a full New Yorker, but at least I'm like, hey, I got my first shakedown.
Wow.
Like business shakedown. I got to see it firsthand.
Have you been back to that Chinese restaurant?
We haven't gone in again, but we've walked by to make sure that they haven't been, firebombed or anything.
Oh my God.
And they're fine.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Now that is, I feel of New York stories, that is a very classic.
Yeah.
Like that's straight out of that's like something straight out of an unmade Martin Scorsese movie.
Oh, absolutely.
I have a odd romanticization of kind of that era. Like good, like Martin Scorsese does a great job of initially making being in the mafia look like it's cool.
Right. Well, I think that's some of the dynamics of like all those like crime films. They give in to the excess and the excitement up front so much that like people focus on that. They focus on like the first half or 2/3 of the movie until like, no, bad things happen because these people are fundamentally bad. So yeah, absolutely. He definitely does that.
Yeah. And it never ends well. Have you watched The Irishman yet?
I have. Yeah.
The ending is just so, there's a very desperate kind of sadness to the ending. And especially and I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who still, who woke up and still is trying to find out where they fell asleep watching it. It's long, but it's amazing.
It is great.
Yeah, that very last moment was just like, oh man. Like, and then the whole scene with the nurse where she doesn't like know. It's crazy to think. I've had this conversation with a few comedians. Like I feel like our art form feels like it can sometimes be very of its moment,
right.
Very temporary. And I think about that specifically with Lenny Bruce. I'm not sure what your feelings on Lenny Bruce are. I know he is important to the history of not just comedy, but freedom of speech, like legitimate, like free speech warrior.
Yeah.
But when I listen to Lenny Bruce, I'm too far removed from what was going on at the time to appreciate it or find it as funny as I'm sure it was.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you go back and listen to like old tapes of like the best comedians of the era, and it feels very far removed.
Oh yeah. I mean, one thing, in terms of, development as a comedian, you look at them today and you're like, oh no. But at the time, I guess I was seeing it as, just outside of it. But like Dennis Miller on like Weekend Update or Dennis Miller Live or anything like that. And, being like, oh, this is so funny. He's got a style that's really good. I might not know, exactly the, news stories that he's covering, especially, but, it's on Comedy Central. This is what they have the rights to. I'm going to watch it. But, enough, it was close enough in proximity to where it's like, okay, I have some idea of what it is. But now, I go back to that and I'm like, okay, outside of like Jeopardy knowledge of those things, I don't really know what he was talking about.
Yeah.
And it's very, very difficult to, link into that or, even, other comedians, just like from a true stand-up perspective.
Yeah.
Anything, remotely political or remotely, of that ilk is very, very difficult to like really latch into. And it's like, okay, maybe like the person's personality is engaging and interesting, but outside of that, it's very difficult to maintain, the amount of, appreciation that I once had if I had seen it as a kid or anything like that.
Yeah.
Or even understand how people really, really liked it at the time. You know what I mean? So, But I mean, I can break it down from like a formatting. Like, what did I listen to recently? So I listened to Mo Rocca's Mobituaries audiobook. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and they had a thing about the first family, right? So it's the JFK character, and it gets ruined by JFK getting killed.
Yep.
But you listen to that, and it was specifically designed to where it is based on the idea that it's the first family just being like regular people. So it's still funny, but at the time it would have been way better. You know what I mean? It's because it's like, okay, yeah, you're doing the voice, and you're doing the I have an idea of who JFK was and everything like that. But if it was at that time and you were really, really, really in that moment, it would have been like, oh my God, you know what I mean?
The crazy thing. Yeah, that makes total sense to me. Have you ever heard of this Amazon Prime show called Alpha House?
Yeah. I watched that. I was very displeased with how it ended.
Yeah, I would have loved for them to have gotten another season, but I don't think you could do that show now because the association with like Republican senators is considered so toxic with because they're also in line with what the current president is doing, that it would have a completely different. You'd have to completely change it.
Yeah,
I feel the same way about the third season of Designated Survivor. Like when Designated Survivor was just like a straight up patriotic kind of network TV by the numbers political thriller.
Right.
I was more in line with that format, but then the third season on Netflix, outside of them being able to curse now,
right,
and they started like, oh, shades of gray, man.
Yeah,
it didn't hit for me the same way.
Right. My favorite thing about Alpha House, going back to it, when Obama announced like that he was lifting some sanctions on Cuba, I did a tweet. I'm like, oh, looks like he's finally seen the second season of Alpha House. And the guy that has like that policy liked my tweet, and I'm like, hell yeah, I didn't even hashtag this.
He's just looking.
He's like, yeah, somebody appreciates it, and I'm like, yeah, man, that's good. That's a reasonable policy,
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, it's fun. I really like those early Amazon, the ones where I think that one was one they just fast tracked. But, when around that same time when they were like, oh, hey, what should we make? And like letting people vote on shows. That was, based on like the pilot, giving everybody the opportunity to like choose which pilots they liked. I really, really was excited about that. And it failed as a concept because the people are going to go with either what they think is like the most interesting concept necessarily, or like what celebrities they know that are in the show or anything like that. So I mean, it didn't work as well as I think they wanted it to, but it's still novel.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea approach of basically making the viewing public the network executives
right
in that moment. That's interesting. I also find I go to certain streaming services to because I want to see specific things, like watching like a BS reality TV show on Netflix is not something I would ever want to do.
Right.
I would watch some. Nor would I want to watch like a list of like the top 10 worst moments in WWE history.
Right.
But I would want to do that on YouTube. Like YouTube is like you go like there's very specific. I associate a specific type of thing with a specific type of service at this point in history.
Yeah. Well, I was waiting. I was just watching WWE in Espanol. It was Raw.
Bueno.
Yeah, muy bueno. It is fantastic. And so you bringing that up allows me to just reference this. So in high school, we had a thing in my Spanish class, which I do not understand Spanish anymore. I understand it, but I don't know it anymore, where you would have to watch once a week or once every 2 weeks a program in Spanish. And every time I just watch wrestling in Spanish because how they do it is they start the sentence in English and then they take over. So it's basically both audios just superimposed over one another.
Uh-huh.
So I could still understand what they were saying in English, and I'm like,
Uh-huh.
oh yeah, this is it. Just nostalgia dynamic was a lot of fun. So I was very excited about it. But yeah, no, that same sort of thing with like I go here for this, I go there for this. What is it? Netflix has a new, they have a reality show that they're coming out with, like where it's the catfish one or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, where everybody's like, interacting through like some fake social media thing. And I'm like, and I keep getting the promos for it. And I'm like, I'm not going to watch it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like, this isn't what I go to Netflix for. Use this money to make another show.
Yeah. Yeah, make like an episodic kind of half-hour show. That's because I'm thinking about like, because Netflix like throws a lot of money at like romantic comedies because they're relatively inexpensive to make, and that kind of movie, someone who can't go out to the theater will watch that
Absolutely.
at their house. So I also think they could throw those resources at like, if they wanted to get super crazy, they could revive the 3-camera sitcom.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because
I have a certain nostalgia for that format. Because in a way, it's the closest to doing like live theater that you can get on TV. Like when you have, and you could do like just have like a single set, then you just have some witty banter go back and forth, and then I bet people would love a clever idea like that.
Oh yeah, and I mean they have some toes in that sort of dynamic. I think they just they don't have one where it's like we're going for everybody. You know what I mean? Like they've segmented out who they think will watch this, and then they target those people. They don't have one where it's like, yeah, we're gonna have our own version of Seinfeld. You know what I mean? Or not that exactly that, but they don't have their like, this is going to be, everybody's gonna like this. They don't have something like that. They have, we know this demographic is going to like this based on the fact that they've watched these things. They keep watching Frasier. Okay, cool. They're going to love this.
Yeah.
They keep watching, The Irishman or anything remotely related to that. They're going to like this thing. You know what I mean? As opposed to being like, okay, what can we get for everybody to at least appreciate?
Yeah.
And I think that kind of, I don't know. I assume they're making money. Who knows?
They might be. Well, that I feel like, because pop culture I feel like is kind of is very segmented now compared to people like when the Cosby Show would just get like millions upon millions of viewers like back in the day. And I don't know what you grew up watching, but I feel like there were these like huge cultural experiences that everyone was aware of, and now it's. And I kind of like this. I sort of like that people are kind of like, because I used to do this all the time. Like how I discovered new music was like, you get your favorite band's album, and then you open the booklet and you see what bands they think, and then you go buy those albums, and then you see who they think, and you just continue to go down the rabbit hole.
Right.
And I feel like the way the media landscape is now is it kind of forces more people to be like that, to kind of like dig and find their own.
Well, right. I mean, the thing, as a kid, I was always, based on, what my older brothers were liking and everything like that. So I'm like, oh, okay, those are the things I should like, and, these are the things that my parents, my dad loves the Beach Boys. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to listen to the Beach Boys. Okay. And then, there's Grateful Dead. Okay, cool. We're going to love the Grateful Dead. And we're going to love all this classic rock. Okay, cool. This is all good. But then, my brothers, this early, mid 90s, rap comes in, and it's like, okay, cool. So now I associate reading the first Jurassic Park novel with listening to Metallica, and then the second one with listening to the Beastie Boys. And so if I hear either one of them, I think it's License to Ill, which was the second book. I'm like, oh yeah, that's when Grant, not Grant, because it's the second one. So it's, that's when Malcolm's like doing this. And I'm like, and people are like, what? And I'm like, oh yeah, like that's the Beastie Boys. That's when that song came in. when I was reading it, and they're like, "That's so weird." But like that's that sort of dynamic with the music. It was just picking up and then just associating stuff, and then listening to like what their friends were listening to, and then pulling from that. But like also, I think that there's the the dynamic of like people as a whole like to put people into categories, right? And it's so much easier to stereotype and just work with those dynamics. But the thing is, and with our media and with our choice the way it is, anybody, you can go and get support for anything that you like. If you're like, oh yeah, this seems interesting, I like this. It used to be, oh, nobody in my high school also likes that, so I'm not gonna do that. Whereas now it's like, oh, nobody in my high school does that. Who cares? I'm gonna go to this meetup down the street because I know about it because of the internet, because of Facebook or whatever.
Yep.
And so it allows people to be more confident in the things they like, and I think that's good because everybody, that validation allows for better creativity overall.
I think so. So when you were a kid, what were those things that you wanted to like, but you didn't have the support for liking them? Where did you grow up?
Yeah, I'm from Phoenix, Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
So I lived in that nice area. And so I lived down the street from Alice Cooper.
Really?
Yeah, he's a very nice man. He once gave me a Gatorade when I was running wind sprints down a hill. He's very kind. His kids went to my at least elementary school, and he was involved with like some play that we were doing, like some talent show, and he was the bad guy. And so
Awesome.
My favorite thing. One of my favorite things, I have a couple announcements, or not announcement, but like variety show or talent show stories. But my favorite one was when he was doing that. The kid that was the announcer or the like host came out and he's like, hey, from now on, anytime Alice Cooper comes out, boo him because he's the bad guy, everything like that. And then immediately after that, the next segment was, hey, we're going to thank Alice Cooper for doing this for us, everybody. He's really great that they're doing this.
Sure.
And then Alice Cooper comes out, the whole auditorium just booing him.
Boos him.
And it's like, wait till after so he can like be in the character. Like, let's actually thank the man first. So that's anyway.
I love everything about that.
Yeah,
I love that Alice Cooper is like, yeah, I'll be in your variety show at school kids.
Yeah, and then it's like, no, they're gonna trash you. But yeah, as a kid, I guess the things that I was into, I was, obviously like, okay, so like already brought it up, but like wrestling and everything like that, and then comedy. I was basically leaving, Comedy Central on, just watching that, and so. But with my background and everything, they didn't. I was, kind of shy and dyslexic and all these things, hard to communicate. And so it was a little bit difficult for me to like express myself and be like confident in it, saying like, oh yeah, I like this thing. And so like I'm still to this day like I'm gonna pick my moments to be funny in the if I'm in a group dynamic or in like a work meeting or something like that, I'm gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna understand the dynamics of the situation. Okay, based on this will work. And once I'm comfortable, it's like I can work within those parameters. But yeah, so those sorts of things. At the same time, I probably stuck around with like the Ninja Turtles and like Power Rangers a little too long.
Yeah, I was into both of those.
Yeah, and so those sorts of things. But then as time progressed, I got more into sports in general because it's like, okay, this is an easy thing to talk about. And worst case scenario, I can talk about how I like the uniforms for the teams that wear purple.
Sure.
And then, people will find that funny because it's like, oh, that's what he's focusing on. It's a very simple, thing. But yeah, I mean, I became more normalized as time progressed, as middle school and high school progressed. I mean, also, like, I went to a religious middle school, so like that was a little bit weird because it was like everybody, like you have your like thing that you're doing outside of school. Their thing that a lot of people were doing outside of school was like just completely religious related.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I'm only here because like my parents wanted me to get extra attention and they, wanted me to have a good education. Not necessarily because they're super, super religious. So like it was kind of hard to mesh well with everybody there. Right. So then once I got to high school, it was a little bit more like, oh yeah, okay, sports. And I also want to just understand everybody. And like, so I was the kid that was like always like walking around during lunch saying like, oh, hi, how you doing? Like basically a politician without ever wanting to be a student government person.
Or anything, yeah. And what sports were you getting into?
So I played football, and then I threw in track. So I was a shot putter and discus guy.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I was not good at shot put. Very bad. And also, frankly, I wasn't good at discus either. I was not.
Shot put seems really difficult because, like, every time I watch someone do shot put, I can't imagine how the spinning helps. To me, it seems like it would be like all on the arm, but maybe I don't understand.
Yeah, so that's a very common thing. So shot put is truly 90% if you're doing it correctly, and I never did, from your legs. So it's so it's like, what's a good? Did you ever do football, for instance?
I played soccer.
Okay, soccer. So did you ever do anything remotely related to like squats? Squats. Okay, so squats, same sort of thing as like squats. So like when you go down on a squat and then you pop back up, that same motion, that same use of energy is what you're using in the shot put. So you want to go down low and then pop up, and then release it through your arm. So it's just basically kinetic energy all the way from your feet all the way through to your arm, through to the shot put. I never really got that. The way to figure out how to like actually get that energy, perfectly through. Thus, I've never really got good. Also, early on, I left one of the shot puts in the shot put pit after a couple kids were walking by, like after school, and they stole it. So everybody gave me a hard time for that. And then I got an Olympic-sized one, and I was doing warm-ups because ours were like 12 pounds. The Olympic ones are like 16. And I'm like, oh, I'll do my warm-ups with the Olympic-sized one, and I slipped. And so it goes up. I go down and hit the ground. So then it's like, cool, I'm gonna die.
Right.
And so the thing is, like, so long as you release it, it's gonna go further than you. But like in that moment, it's like, okay, I'm gonna be afraid of this forever. I don't think I'm gonna do this anymore. And then I, still did it for 4 years, but I was never good at it.
Yeah, that's so interesting to me because when my initial impression of you is that you're kind of you come off as very studious.
Yeah,
you are not the first person I would think of as someone who played football and did track. I know those types, and I've known those types, and they bring a very different energy.
Right.
They carry. But I find it interesting that it's almost like you feel like isolated, and then sports become the way that you're trying to relate with your surroundings.
Right. Yeah, because it's an easy entry point to other people. But like,
I found that also because I didn't watch soccer until maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, and I started following it again.
Yeah,
and I find it very easy to get high fives now.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, you can make, now it's like you can just reiterate somebody's talking head point and like, oh yeah, man, I totally agree. But like at the time, it's like I could have, their talking heads are there, you know what I mean, and like. But I could have an opinion of like, oh, this seems like he's not doing that right, and have no idea what I'm talking about. But somebody would be like, yeah, that he should do that better. And it's like, okay, yeah, fine. But like, fundamentally I still didn't fit in there. You know what I mean? I was still like a nerd on the football team, that, had an endomorphic body. So like once I got into a weight room, I'm like, cool, I can be, still kind of hate my body because I was fat as a kid.
Sure.
And being like, oh, I have muscle under this fat, but my mentality of it is like, I look atrocious all the time because the muscles are just pushing everything out. And so I'm like, I'm gigantic, and it's like I'm walking into walls and stuff because my shoulders are so wide, and like, just having no sense of what my body is like, and just like, breaking door frames. Not completely, but it was a weak door frame, plywood. It was fine. It was more indication of how bad the school was in terms of fixing things.
Yeah, I can imagine. Sounds like they did.
Yeah,
resources were not distributed. Properly.
Yeah, we didn't have a shop or anything like that. But yeah, so I mean, it's still that sort of dynamic of like, any group, there's going to be some sort of subgroup that you can latch onto. So it was the same thing with me. It was like, okay, cool, I latch onto those people. And, kind of build friendships from there, and then build like, oh, okay, I'm like, I don't really necessarily like these people so much, but the people that, same thing with the bands. It's like, oh, you just build off of it and be like, okay, these people seem to have, similar interests to me. And then, just, approach everything through kindness. Like another good example, I talk about it in stand up, but, legitimately, I one time got into a fight, with one of my teammates, and he punched me, and I joke around, I'm like, oh, it was an emotional support class and everything like that, which is true. That was more elementary school. I did not handle things, I still do take things too personally, but much more so when I was younger. And so he punched me, and so it was like, okay, well, I can hit him. I know I can hit him, and we were in like, it was a concrete floor with a locker room. So I'm like, I could hit him. I know I outweigh him. I could headbutt him. I could, do all these things. I could hurt him. I can get into this fight. But I'm like, I'm not going to do that. So I just hugged him. And I literally was just like, no, I'm not going to let you go. I'm not going to let you go. And he's like, what the hell are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? And so, that, was a true indicator. And then, after that, for the whole practice, nobody said anything, at least to me, they're probably talking about it. But like, that's a true indicator of like, probably not really cut out for sports. If like I am faced with a clear, aggressive behavior, and then my reaction is, no, you need support. And so, I mean,
that's great. Yeah. That's that's probably a clear indicator that whatever that people talk about on sports shows is maybe not there. Yeah. I would have liked to seen you like get into like MMA or something, like someone hits you and it's just like, no, it's okay. It's okay. Cause that's actually an effective strategy in that sport.
Absolutely. It is. And that's the thing, because like, if they can't hit you anymore, you know what I mean? Like it's, you can win. Eventually somebody will stop them. I guess that probably, a bear hug is not the best submission maneuver all the time.
Yeah. I view bear hug as like that's what pro wrestlers do when they're like, okay, all right, Matt, what I think we're doing pretty good. What move do you want to do next?
Exactly.
Okay. So you'll pretend like you're falling asleep, and then you'll punch me, and then we'll do sunset. Okay. That sounds good. Okay. What you want to go Chili's after this? Okay. Yeah.
Sounds great.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Exactly.
I always like to imagine I imagine wrestlers like having casual conversations during matches.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure they do. You know what I mean? Like just, especially that's what rest holds are, you know what I mean? And like, it's just like, okay, and like, especially things, the Royal Rumble's coming up, but, there's always the ring general for the Royal Rumble. So like they're calling the shots of like, hey, you need to get out here. You need to go out here. But there's a bunch of people that are like supposed to stay in there and just like be tired on the edges. The two people that are like really tired on the like next to the ring post, they're like, hey man, how you doing? this is going pretty well. Yeah.
It's a pretty good match.
I think I'm in. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm sure that they are.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I think I'm gonna. All right, I gotta go. I gotta get eliminated. I'm gonna try to clothesline that guy.
Yeah,
and
and he's gonna reverse, and I'm gonna get tossed out.
Go over the ropes because I'm mid card. I'm not gonna get the number. I'm not gonna get it in the main event at WrestleMania.
Yeah,
no one's gonna buy it if I haven't earned it yet, man.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, but I think you're gonna get there some point.
Yeah,
just gotta keep working hard. Hopefully, make your own creative decisions.
Right.
Don't let if creative doesn't have anything for you, you just gotta do it, man.
You just gotta make it yourself.
You gotta get over.
Get that YouTube channel.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta be undeniable. If the fans like you, then Vince can't fire you.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think about that. I love how, and maybe I don't know how you're always into pro wrestling and comedy growing up.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, I fell off in pro wrestling. I did a lot of listening to my brothers of like, you've outgrown that and that sort of thing, and like listening to like, you should do this instead, sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of like identifying like, no, these are the things I like and these are the things I want to do. Like comedy was one of those things that from an early age, like I enjoy this. I like making people laugh. I like understanding why people are going to laugh.
Mm-hmm.
And then, figuring it out and then, hooking them or whatever.
And who did you like in stand-up? Let me ask you, how old are you?
I'm 32.
You're 32. Okay. So I'm turning 34 this year. So you're a couple years younger than me. So I'm imagining, I'm thinking like Comedy Central Presents, who was on at that time. I remember seeing like Jim David. I remember seeing like maybe Louis C.K.'s first
Mm-hmm.
one. I'm listing all the comedians that would not maybe sound cool. I remember seeing Carlos Mencia's Comedy Central Presents. Dimitri Martin was high school for me. That's when I saw his.
Yeah. So, I mean, I got the Dimitri Martin, absolutely. So it was Comedy Central was constantly on. So like during the days, I was watching like Kids in the Hall and,
Mm-hmm.
Everything like that. And, just absolutely adoring that. And then, Sinbad, love my Gallagher, because those were very cheap specials and they filled a lot of time slots. But
Gallagher had like 15, I think.
Yeah, it's crazy.
He had a lot.
And so watching those, but yeah, Dimitri Martin, the Mitch Hedberg, John Heffron. I mean, guess that's more towards the Last Comic Standing stuff. But
I think so.
Arj Barker was huge into Arj Barker.
I like Arj Barker. Arj Barker has something that I really want to do. I want to become. I would love to be very famous in another country for stand-up and not famous here.
Absolutely.
That would be interesting.
It's a great dynamic. And like listening, I got one of his albums, really, really early on. Issue or Here, I think it was. And just absolutely just listening to that over and over and just being like, okay, cool. Like this is, he's building his stuff out. And like, this probably would be easier to understand if I was watching it, but like it's very, very clear of how like he's building these jokes to work off of one another, and like from a narrative standpoint, how they're self-contained and everything like that. But yeah, so I mean, just as many, Bonnie McFarlane I was huge into Bonnie McFarlane when I was a kid, and just basically eating up anybody that was on. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And
just trying to understand how they were trying to be funny. Like I did in middle school, I did a report on humor. Like you had to do a report on a concept.
Yeah, this is what I wanted to ask you. I'm curious what was sounds like you were analyzing like the format of stand-up comedy very early on, and what did you determine just from the form of stand-up that early on?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things I determined early on is a lot of the reductionist kind of mentality of like, oh yeah, I like comedians, and then it's like, no, there's all these different subsets of like, okay, you have people that are, I guess especially at that time is more there were fewer people that did more long form like narrative, like Mike Birbiglia and everything like that, which once I saw Mike Birbiglia I was like, oh, this is perfect. But the, more stand up, especially with, young boys like Mitch Hedberg and everything like that. They're like, oh yeah, well, this is easily digestible. This will be funny no matter who says it necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
If you do it in his style, it'd be even better. But,
Yeah.
the writing is so solid, you can easily remember it.
The craft of the joke is so good.
Exactly. So, the just understanding like, okay, so these things are being, specifically presented to get a specific response.
Mm-hmm.
And they are constructed in such a way that not only can people understand them, but they can, to some, I didn't really understand the concept of empathy probably at that point.
Uh-huh.
But, they can empathize and put themselves into those sorts of situations, whether it be the embarrassment or anything like that. Like one of the things that always sticks with me is the DC Benny bit, where he's like, I'm going to cut you good. If you remember that.
I don't know if I remember that one.
Effectively, he's got a big break. He's going to be in some TV show or something like that. And his line is, it's like a group of people. And his line is, I'm going to cut you good. And so he's, trying to figure out how to best say it, everything like that. And then when he finally watches the show after they filmed it and everything, he's watching it with his wife or his girlfriend, I don't recall. And they get to the scene where he's supposed to be in. And he's not there. And he's like, what is that? And she, says, oh, they cut you good. And does it the exact same way he was practicing it. And like, I think that was his closer for his Comedy Central Presents.
Yeah, that's a good joke.
But it's like everybody can, jump into that situation of being like, wait, no, I thought I was supposed to. Oh yeah. But like just the way it's just like the energy builds up and it's like, oh man, like you're so excited for him to get his break. And then it's like, oh no. But then like having like a significant other, somebody that loves you, be able to do an inside joke like that and be like, hey man, it's okay, is like that's the icing on the cake of that joke of like, if they just did that and it's like, oh, they cut me good. Okay, funny. But like to have his wife to be like, oh no, they cut you good. And it's like, it's so much better.
That's great. That reminds me, when I think of like broadly like universal comedians like that, like, because I feel like there are lots of comics that I feel like their material is like very universally relatable across like backgrounds and differences in like race or gender or what have you. Like Gabriel Iglesias, I think is very good about
absolutely.
that. His story about when he got cast in Magic Mike, and then the way the scene gets cut is it just looks like all you can see is just some chubby pervert in a box having the time of his life.
Right, absolutely.
It's just such a great punchline to that story because I don't know if you've ever done like short films or movies or whatever, but it never looks. It always looks completely different from how it's being. You think it's going to be on set. Mitch Hedberg's Comedy Central Presents, I found very interesting because that was sort of one of his bigger things that kind of helped broke him and got him very popular. But if you watch the unedited version of it, it's not the strongest set he's ever had.
Oh, right.
He's like he's like meandering and like the crowd doesn't quite warm up to him, but the way it cut together, where it just goes like joke to joke to joke, is much more like tighter, I guess.
Right.
It's really that was very interesting to me to see that.
Oh, absolutely, and that's the dynamic. I had a friend I should message him, but I had a friend just recently do a audition for one of those stand-up shows, and he he was freaking out about it. Because he's like, oh yeah, they want me to do 11 to 15, and then they're gonna cut it down to 5. And I'm like, oh, and he's like, I want to make sure everything goes. And I'm like, I don't know, how. I assume it went well because he is a good comedian. He's got a dynamic that will play no matter what. Yeah. But I mean, I think there's a dynamic of like how if he presented himself in the way that he normally does, it would be hard to edit it. Effectively to 5 minutes because it's like everything will build off of one another. Yeah. And I think that like with more like set up punchline comedians, it's easy to cut it up and like edit it and everything like that. But like with like the true stand-up experience is getting the personality of that person. Yeah. And then being like, oh, okay, I'm going to laugh at the fact that they like, ask it, like, this is an example of me, but it's something that I've enjoyed recently when I've performed. Instead of, doing true like audience interaction or crowd work or anything like that. So is anybody employed? And people will like, okay, what? It's like, yeah, here, employment is good. And then just do my joke, like just like the bare minimum of crowd work. But I do that, to some degree, introducing each, personalized story that is somewhat related to that concept. So eventually throughout it, people will pick up on like, he's not even trying to do a transition here. And like people will laugh at that. And it's a very simple thing, but like, it helps, it's like, okay, cool. I see that person laughing. I'm like, I probably have them on board for the rest of my set. And there's better examples than that, I'm sure, with other people, but that's, I just, noticed that the other day.
Yeah. It's almost like a riff on the, like, anybody here do this kind of like classic nightclub crowd work. And did you start comedy in Arizona?
I did. Yeah. So I did,
and what is stand-up like in Phoenix?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, here's a dissertation. So now, stand-up is good in Phoenix. When I first started, I started in college. I started when I was 18 because it was, again, around the same time as Last Comic Standing and everything. We had the Tempe Improv. I was going to ASU. So,
and what were you studying?
Creative writing and business and sociology. So I got minors in business and sociology. As one of my professors said, "Oh, you're an English major?" I'm like, "Yeah." "Oh, but you got 2 minors?" He's like, "Oh, so you actually want to have a job?" I'm like, "Yeah, dude.
Yeah,
I don't want to teach Poe." He taught Poe. He was a very good teacher. He gave me an A. Okay. Sorry.
No problem.
But no, so that was going on. I knew I wanted to do it. At that time, I was doing mostly impersonations, very, very weird characters, that sort of thing. And so I'm like, oh, the improv's right down the street from my dorm. I'm going to go and apply. So I think I did 1 show, maybe 2 beforehand. Like there's a local radio station, like college radio, and I was able to do that. They had like some sort of open mic at an internet cafe. That's how old I am. And so when they were actually like a viable business.
Yeah.
And so we did that, went and applied, was one of the last people picked. And like I was dressed in an approximation of like, how like Gary Goldman looks good.
Yeah.
On stage and like wears a dress shirt and like looks good and it fits him.
Yeah.
I was that, but it didn't look good. I was like, Gary Goldman's a great comedian. I should look like Gary Goldman. And it's no, you don't wear a shirt that fits, Matt. Just because you have a dress shirt doesn't mean that that's what you should wear.
Totally.
But yeah, so I got seen. I was one of the last ones seen. And the producers are like, okay, how long have you been doing this? I'm like, this is like the 3rd time I've been up there. Like, it shows, but you're very funny. You've been funnier than a good portion of the people we've seen today. So keep it up, whatever. Problem was not a lot of places to do it at that time when you were under 21. So I went to a local bar and cantina and restaurant that did not care. So the law in Arizona was that so long as you served food and made about 75% of your money off of food, or at least that's what you declared, you could still have people that were under 21 in the establishment. So this place allowed in the back room people to put on a show every Friday night. So it was basically a $5 cover charge for everybody, and then it was a bringer show. So if you brought people, you did make money off of them once you hit a certain point. But it was a hard show. Let's put it that way. So a lot of, Arizona has, or at least especially back then, had a, like the, blues style of comedy where like, you try and get away with whatever you want. if that makes
like the guys who like really like Attell and Patrice and Bill Burr,
right.
but don't pick up on the craft and nuances of those three guys.
Exactly.
And just go for the like, oh, I'm just gonna say a word.
Right. Exactly.
With no joke.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's a very
I'm familiar.
Yeah. So that was very, very heavily, heavy influence in the style of comedy that was being produced in Arizona. So the people would get, a reaction, but it wouldn't necessarily be funny, if that's the sort of thing. So there was a lot of like, stuff being shared around of like, so long as you're getting an emotional response, you're doing well, as a comedian. And so, after a while of, doing that too often and taking advantage of my friends' support, I stopped doing it till I was just about to leave college. Then started doing it again when I went to law school, and basically was using it as an excuse. Law school as an excuse to just do comedy. Yeah. Like as I started law school, I also started working at the new comedy club that opened up in downtown Phoenix, and basically was balancing going to school full time at a law school with working all weekend, and so trying to using that to parlay into running their open mic and doing trying to get hosting gigs and getting hosting gigs. Early on, I'm pretty sure because the host that they wanted to get canceled or didn't show up, and then being like, oh, hey, Matt's a comedian, let's put him on. And it's like, sure. I am not the type of comedian you would want on this show. I do not have the type of energy or the requisite energy to be a good host for the show that you're putting on.
I know. I was the same way when I started. Like my first weekend like hosting at Magooby's Joke House, I just did not. I was so new. I didn't have the like MC energy. Like I didn't have the grasp of that part of the job at all.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, to some degree I still don't, honestly, but I have, my go-to dynamics of like, okay, this is for the type of comedian that I am. Yeah. This is how I host. But at that time, no idea how to do that. And then, hosting their open mic and like, weekly book portion show in the side room, or I guess actually not even a side room. It's a whole other restaurant and bar. It's doing that. And that was great because the way in which it was designed was there was the bar and then there was the stage behind the bar, but it was raised. So you were about 15 feet away from anybody else. Yeah. So like I had to like, project and like get kind of weird to do that. So that was really, really beneficial. But yeah, so then as time progressed, the folks that bought Stand Up Live, that's the place I was working.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Stand Up Live. I saw them on Bar Rescue.
Yeah. Oh no, that's Stand Up Scottsdale. Oh, Stand Up Scottsdale. We'll get there.
Okay.
So they. There's some bad unfortunate stuff that happened with the Tempe Improv and the ownership group there. So they ended up buying the Tempe Improv as well. After a couple of years, and so they had the 2A clubs were owned by the same people.
Gotcha.
So it was great because it's like, okay, you could get gigs at both places, and like as time has progressed, the comedians that I was coming up with that are still there are getting hosting and featuring gigs like pretty consistently between the two clubs, and then along with those is there are a series of like other clubs. So there's the Comedy Spot in Scottsdale, which was, based on the, take comedy classes, and, then you can also like perform here and everything like that. Or, they had their monthly showcases, which people signed up 6 months in advance because it was there were so few shows to do in like a club format. Yeah. So then there was like, oh, you got to bring 10 people and everything like that. Yep. They got to pay $5 to $10 or whatever. And it's like, you don't get any of that money. Yeah. And, again, sorry everybody if you're listening to this for having you come to that. So there was that, and then Stand Up Scottsdale opened up. They jumped around to a couple locations, but the people that were behind that were really, really dedicated to trying to break the mentality of the bringer comedy show. Have people come up with a concept and, perform and do that concept and learn how to promote and learn how to, build. And like, if you're going to charge, you should be getting some of that money. And so that was really great. Got opportunities to open and feature there, and just really really great opportunities, really good dynamic of like being able to meet people. They're running 2 shows at the same time, so a lot of stage time going around, and then like the bar rescue stuff, obviously, which is a
did that help like get more people interested in going?
Yeah, I mean, it did help with a dynamic of that, but like there's the issue with the bar rescue thing is like they don't look at local codes and regulations. So like they put up in that episode, if I recall correctly, they put up like a marquee with who's coming out in Scottsdale. That was illegal. You couldn't have a marquee like that.
Wow.
So they got fined for that. And then there were like just general improvements to like the property. So like there was some like, like a tree root had uprooted some of the cement. So there was uneven. They didn't fix that, even though it was a potential hazard. Very simple fix, probably cost, a couple $100 or whatever to like, you're ripping up all this other stuff. You may as well.
Right.
They didn't do that. And that's the thing, like Bar Rescue had a really, really, they mined Phoenix and Scottsdale so much, because it's so much a like, in that same time became a like foodie and like, oh, we got to go out, we got excess money, we got to have a fun time.
Yeah.
And like all these like businesses were struggling to like, compete with that, or like, update themselves to like that sort of like, oh, you can, get reviewed on Yelp and you can get reviewed on Google, and like people are going to say like, oh, this is a dive bar, but it's like, but it's a fun dive bar. You know what I mean? Yeah. And like, you can serve good food here at this place still, even though, just clean your bathroom. But yeah, so started doing comedy out there, enjoyed that. And then just this last, I started doing a monthly comedy show called the Storrs Objection out there. It's a show where I basically am like an attorney or a judge, or taking a deposition of the comedians. Got a theme, and I basically cross-examine the comedians during their sets. So I started doing that at a small independent theater out there, and then started doing it at the Herberger Theater, which is a big art and performance center there.
Oh, cool.
And then
because that's where I met you, and he was when you guys were in New York for Cinderblock.
Yeah.
And the one I remember the most was Patrick Hasty, and I said this before, but it makes sense. It was you guys taking shots at Hasty while he was eating a salad on stage.
Yeah. My favorite thing about that is so I deliberately set his name incorrectly because I have it's the same thing with the dyslexia. I have a lot of difficulty with pronouncing names or anything like that, and so I'm like, I know that other comedians on the show, I'm going to mispronounce their name, but I'm gonna really focus on it because I know I'm going to, so I'm going to over pronounce their name. So Jen was also on that show. Her first comment was like, wow, you over pronounced my name, like nobody usually pronounces it perfectly. And I'm like, yes. And then I was going to do that with everybody's name, and then I was going to get to him, and that was the one I was going to mess up. But the bit didn't translate because like, I think somebody like canceled last minute or something like that. Or maybe it wasn't a great bit. But to me, I was very excited about it. But yeah, so it's that sort of dynamic of like just having a supportive heckler, but with under the guise of that it's adversarial.
Sure.
But it still is ends up being me like, are you okay at some point? My favorite part of doing in Phoenix was like, there's everybody, was for a period, it was the hot show. So I was getting, fielding all these requests, and I was like, oh
Cool.
yeah, this person is, they're trying and everything like that. Let's put them on the show. And so that ended up getting me a couple people like dropping acid before doing their sets. Fun. And then like the people that like have panic attacks on stage because they didn't realize like I would be actively chiming in and like breaking the timing of their sets. And and eventually it led to me getting like support group pamphlets and handing them out to comedians during their sets, being like, are you okay? Like, do you need help? Because also like there's the dynamic, mental health issues of comedians. They're going to joke about like suicide or homicide or anything like that. And it's like, hey, since you brought that up, here's a pamphlet. Get help. And so like, it's just fun sorts of dynamics with all that. So yeah, it's a good time. So yeah, I try, and I've started doing it out here.
And you do it at a QED?
Yeah, do it at QED, and that has been going really well. I'm with Infinite Sketch, so that's, I basically try and do it in the opposite month of whenever that is. So I can, focus on learning lines and everything like that in one month, and then the next month, like, okay, let's focus on the promotion and getting this booked for the objection. So that's been a pretty good balance. So yeah, I mean, it's been fun.
Excellent. And you did that. How long did you do that show in Phoenix before you moved to New York?
About 3 years. So yeah, so it was at Space 55, an amazing black box theater in Phoenix. And then for the last 6 months, I had joined a board because a friend of mine was associated with it, who's also a comedian, and they were doing yearly fundraisers that were stand-up related. And so he got involved and was like, hey, we can bring in headliners for this. And he's like, Matt, I think you would do well. You're an attorney now, so you probably have the disposable income to do this. And I'm like, sure, yeah, whatever. Missed about 3 months of meetings because I didn't get put onto their email list. And then was like, oh, hey, yeah, I actually do want to be involved in this. I just thought you guys like ghosted me.
Right.
And so started with that. And I'm like, hey, you guys should bring it. You have it's a big room, and it is designed truly for, theater and having sets and everything. But you guys, an on-off night, do a comedy show. You know what I mean? You can still rent it out, but like you have enough seats. There's like 110, 120 seats. If you, support and give, a media kit to the comedians, they can potentially sell that out. So I started doing the objection there for the last few months that I was living in Phoenix, and that was fantastic. You know what I mean? I don't know how many, I know they put on some other stand-up shows, but it was just like, the dynamic of Phoenix really went from like, okay, there's no place to perform to like, you can perform literally anywhere. There's so many opportunities. You just have to like, negotiate appropriately or effectively.
Yeah. Baltimore was kind of the same way. Like there was only, you could do New Talent Night at one of the clubs. You could get into the other club if you knew somebody, and there was like one booked open mic a week. And now it's gotten the regional scenes, I think, out around major cities that aren't New York and Los Angeles is starting to get pretty nice and supportive. Like Denver is really good.
Oh, Denver's fantastic.
Denver is really good. Chicago's always been really good, but is still really good. So to hear Phoenix is growing as well is nice to hear. Yeah, all these like regional scenes. And how long have you been in New York now? It'll be 2 years in like a week. So that's great. That's great, man. I've been it'll be 10 years for me in June. So I still love it as much as the first day I moved here. Are you? I want to think of this is something I always like to ask to close out because I'm really big on on plans. Like I always have this podcasting is always like a thing I can do pretty quickly and be creative. Yeah. But I always like thinking bigger plans. What is something that you want to make that you haven't made yet, or what is something cool that doesn't exist that you want to make exist?
Let's see here. I would like it, like from like a product dynamic or like a show.
Do you have a show or some kind of project that you is like a dream project?
Okay, yeah,
Like Peter Sellers always wanted to make Being There.
absolutely.
What's your Being There?
Being There is Being There for me. I love that. I own that. I've read the script multiple times. It's so fantastic. I've read the book. The book is it's unbelievable. Sorry. The thing that I would like, it's already existed. But Hattie and I had a show in Phoenix called Pep Rally. Completely glossed over that. Hopefully she mentioned it. But absolutely fantastic. It was an educational-based comedy and variety show. And then we tried to do some different iterations of that. And, it's kind of hard to communicate and explain and, like, get people out.
Yeah.
But I'd really like to bring back some version of that where it is a mock children's TV program or presentation, but you have comedians, you have poets, you have experts, you have all these things, and then just having that sort of variety dynamic where we can just play off one another. I think that would just be fantastic.
Excellent. That sounds very, very cool. I definitely think you can make that happen.
Oh yeah,
I feel like in New York especially, there's definitely tons of resources for that. That sounds like a very cool idea. Because I love being able to do variety stuff also, because it harkens back, to me at least, it makes me think of like the days before there were like full-time comedy clubs and comedians were like the opening acts for musicians, or they appeared on like the Gong Show or things like that, like classic show business compared to while I love comedy club, while I do love comedy clubs, like I'm not in the group. I'm not one of the chosen ones to be in that scene. So like the sort of like and the sort of like man without a name of comedy, just like coming in, doing the show, and then being out.
I
relate to.
Yeah, I was just back home in Phoenix, and somebody was like, "Hey, man, why aren't you like in the clubs and everything?" I'm like, "That I'm not actively going out and doing." And he's like, "Yeah, I don't really see you as like a road comic either." I'm like, "Yeah," and he's like, "You really are like a comedian where it's like if I'm gonna go out on the road, it's like, cool, I want to do 1 or 2 nights. I will just get so lonely." Being here for a weekend.
Yeah.
But coming in and being like, oh yeah, I'm going to put on this very specific thing. It's been heavily marketed for this 1 or 2 nights, and we're going to have a lot of fun and have a fun dynamic. Ideal. You know what I mean? That's the perfect format for comedy, in my opinion. It doesn't get stale and gets people interested.
Yeah, and it's also not like star driven. That's something I think about a lot, because there's I think of like there's lots of like music and comedians I like. There are fewer ones that I would like see everything they put out, every special or album they put out, and then you get about who would I lobby hard to be able to go out on a weeknight to see live, and especially if you're not like a name, it's hard to even get booked in these places. But if you have like a cool idea, an idea is much easier to market than an individual.
Yeah. I mean, I can sell an idea, but selling a person that nobody's ever heard of is very, very difficult. Yeah.
Dude, this has been great. Is there anything we can plug before we get out here?
I mean, Infinite Sketch coming back here in February, and then the Storrs Objection. Just check QED. That'll be coming up hopefully in the next few months. And I forgot. I was like, oh, I'm going to be on a podcast today. I should probably get a date. So haven't heard back on that, but hopefully get something situated there. But yeah, you can follow me at MT Storrs, STORRS. And thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Oh, dude, no problem, man. I appreciate you and had you taken time to come over on a Sunday afternoon. So thank you very much. And yeah, let's work on something sometime.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Cool, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, that's our show for the week. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Matt, for coming over and for having a nice chat. I certainly appreciate it. And if you guys are in the New York City area, keep an eye out for the QED calendar in Astoria, Queens, for Matt's show, The Storrs Objection. That's at QED in Astoria, Queens. And also, folks, I want to thank all of you for continuing to listen and support the show. I really appreciate each of you being here. I also want to give a shout out to my supporter on Patreon at the awesome producer level. Thank you so much, Mary Beth Mooney. I really appreciate your support. If you want to check out some of the reward tiers I have available, you can go to patreon.com/awesomedisaster. Check out what is available over there if anything suits your fancy. And if you know someone who might enjoy listening to this podcast, we are available wherever you stream your on-demand audio programs, as they say. You can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. You can listen to us on Stitcher, add us to your favorites playlists. Everything you do listening to the show helps other people find the show. So thank you guys very much for being here. I appreciate all of you. I hope you're in a good place whenever you're listening to this. And I will see you folks next week between Awesome and Disaster. Take care, everybody.